Ichiro is a hopeless loser who spends his days drawing anime waifus for sweaty neckbeards. However, everything changes when an alien princess crashes into his backyard and begins his quest to finally get touched by a woman. It all starts when Ichiro's father kicks the bucket, leaving him to take care of his two younger siblings. They helplessly ask him what they will do, and the man tells them he will take care of everything. Several months later, Ichiro becomes a mangaka but accidentally oversleeps, leaving him worried about the deadline. In the meantime, his cousin Chihiro babysits his siblings Machi and Fumio, who decide to bring him breakfast because he's been working so hard. Noticing Ichiro's stress, they suggest he touch some grass and hire an assistant, but he explains it's hard to find someone who does finishing by hand. Despite being way behind schedule, Ichiro tells his siblings that he's got everything under control and that they will head out for a steak once he gets paid. He recalls his father passing away because he couldn't live with the failure that was his son, who, instead of finding a job, started living off manuscript fees and the rent from the building he inherited. Not even the smelly Discord mods buy his stuff, but he still dreams of making it big so he can send his siblings to college. Just then, he gets a call from his friend Morikuni, who lets him know that he's found an assistant for him. At that time, Machi decides to predict his future using fortune sticks, but leaves without telling him. As she strolls to school, she tells Chihiro that Ichiro's fortune stick came out blank, just like his non-existent love life. Meanwhile, Morikuni calls Ichiro again, letting him know that the assistant might be a good one and that he should pay her a visit. No one has ever touched Ichiro with even a 10-foot pole, so he immediately runs off and finds her alone in a park. As she turns around to take a look at him, Ichiro's meat-baton gets excited, probably because he's never seen a blonde before. She asks if he is Momoti Kokon, but Ichiro begs her not to use his author name in public. He doesn't want Machi's class fellows to know that her brother is a degenerate who draws Apag overlords for a living, which is why he prefers his real name in public. The lady apologizes for the confusion and introduces herself as Shiori, revealing that she will be working as his assistant from now on. Ichiro is already behind schedule, so he asks her to get to work immediately. Taking her to his place, he apologizes for the rush and explains the situation, giving her all the necessary equipment to get started. He suggests she changes into something more comfortable, but Shiori says it's not an issue because she's always dressed as a wannabe Wednesday Addams. Despite that, Ichiro gives her a hoodie so her clothes don't get dirty. He then asks her to draw borders and background, and Shiori impresses him with her speed and neat results. He assumes she's a veteran at work, but is shocked to learn that this is the first time she's taken a job like this. She reveals she learned everything recently using a book, so Ichiro gives him a page to see what she's got. Seeing the results, Ichiro is relieved because not only is she quick, but also very skilled, which means he can meet the deadline. Just then, the siblings return home and see Shiori, commenting that she looks like a gemstone princess. Ichiro introduces them to each other, and Machi acts like he just committed a war crime because heaven forbid a cute girl lifts a finger. She then gives Shiori a 10-minute break so she can show her around the building. She first shows her the social apartments occupied by a manicurist, an office worker, their cousin Chihiro, and others. Next, she takes her to the communal kitchen, which is a hangout spot for all the desperate loners. She also shows her the vacant bedroom that the assistants use for staying overnight, which Shiori decides to use for herself. Later, as Ichiro arrives for lunch, he learns that Shiori chose to eat in the vacant room by herself. After lunch, the duo keeps working till the night until Ichiro decides to make them tea. However, Shiori insists that she should be the one doing this stuff as per her assistant duties. While she's at it, Machi tells her that Ichiro had to take up the role of the breadwinner when their dad died, so he is always hesitant to ask others for help. After the siblings retreat to their room, Shiori brings Ichiro tea and the man tells her to rest. However, Shiori decides to continue working and tell Ichiro more about herself. She reveals she is 19 and only started reading manga last year from her grandmother's collection. In there, she found a manga that Ichiro had done and mistook his weird kinks into a new form of love and affection. For the next couple of days, the two of them continue to work on the manga until it's very close to finishing. Ichiro asks Shiori to rest, claiming he can handle the rest on his own. However, when he learns that a whole page is missing from the pile, he starts looking around the whole room frantically. Eventually, he finds it under the desk, but realizes he only drew the basic sketch before it got separated from the pile. Shiori offers to help, but Ichiro refuses, insisting that if anyone's cleaning up this mess, it's the idiot who made it. However, with time running out, Shiori insists on helping and urges him to accept her support. With that, the duo pulls out an all-nighter and finishes the page just before the deadline. As soon as they are finished, Shiori falls asleep on the spot while Ichiro gets up to mail the papers. Just then, he notices something sticking out of Shiori's back and assumes it is a drawing pen. When he tries pulling it out, he feels as if he's floating in space, only for Shiori to angrily grab his collar and explain that what he just did has bound their destinies together. She adds that touching her stinger is only permissible between people who are married, and she is extremely disappointed because she took him for someone who wouldn't take advantage of a sleeping woman. However, Ichiro tells her to stop being a bitch and draws what he saw, making her realize he was trying to prevent her from getting hurt. After they apologize to each other, Shiori believes it was a mistake that he touched her because they've only just met. Ichiro, on the other hand, thinks that even this short time together was enough to see that she is hardworking and honest, so he wouldn't call their encounter a mistake. Realizing that physical contact between people who trust each other can be beautiful, she says she doesn't desire a marriage out of a mistake and prefers a genuine connection. When Ichiro says this is moving too fast and they should get to know each other better, she reveals she's been following his work for a while now and understands how much effort he puts into it. She's basically his #1 fangirl, but to avoid turning it into a cringe fest, they agree to keep it at just friends for now. She then reveals she is the princess of the star people who wandered on this planet from outer space. According to the customs of her people, a marital union must be formed with the one linked with their stingers, but despite that, she was set to marry someone of her parents' choosing. However, when she started reading manga, she was introduced to the concept of unfettered love and left the island. Now she wants Ichiro to fall in love with her, but the man explains that it does not work this way. He tells her not to force herself into this relationship, but Shiori reveals they have already been bound by destiny. The doorbell rings just in time, saving Ichiro from drowning in the cringe of the moment. Later, he shows his work to Morikuni, who gives him the green light, allowing him a sigh of relief. Before he leaves, he asks Ichiro to show him some colored pages next time, which makes him really excited. Meanwhile, Shiori is in her bed thinking about how this distance from her people will weaken the bond between them. The next day, Machi and Fumio are discussing tonight's barbecue when Shiori shows up and introduces herself to Chihiro. She offers to make her breakfast, but Shiori says she has to leave to take care of a few things first. Later, Machi heads to Ichiro's room to wake him up, only to find her collapse on the table. As they put him in a blanket, Ichiro gets a text from Shiori asking for her payment. However, Fumio responds on his behalf, letting her know that Ichiro has fallen ill. Following that, Fumio and Machi leap on Ichiro like demons, trying to share a curse, leaving him begging Chihiro to exorcise these lunatics. Later, as Ichiro wonders what Shiori is up to, the woman walks into the room and reveals he is sick because of her influence. She explains that the physical distance between them is what has caused this condition, and the only way to fix it is if they stay close to each other. She adds that it is a protective measure taken by the Great Star to ensure that the princesses aren't pumped and dumped by men. She also apologizes to Ichiro, claiming it was never her intention to put him in such trouble. As she lies down next to him, staring awkwardly into his eyes, she mentions Machi telling her that Ichiro really doesn't want to work in this field and only does it to support them. However, Ichiro explains that even though the main reason is still money, he actually enjoys his work, which is very rare in this world. Just then, Shiori notices a book by his side and Ichiro explains it contains some colored sketches he has been practicing. After going through it, Shiori picks the one she likes the most and Ichiro decides to work on it further. However, he is still not in the best shape, so he asks for a sloppy toppy to make himself feel better. In the end, he settles for the hand-holding and immediately feels warm and comfy, making him realize Shiori was telling the truth all along. Later, Ichiro wakes up all better and Fumio embraces him because he's happy to see him in good health. Ichiro then meets Shiori outside, who decides to rent a room in the building so they can stay close to each other. The next day, she moves into her new room and Ichiro notices she only brought a handful of belongings. Later, as Ichiro is removing weeds from his garden, Shiori joins him and asks if he's thinking of an annulment to their engagement. When Ichiro says yes, she says she will have her island people look into it. After she's finished with the weed, she reveals she has to go shopping and asks Ichiro to come with her. The two head to the mall where Shiori tries on different dresses, all of which are just cheap Wednesday Addams cosplays. Eventually, she lands on a dress that looks like a school uniform, but is worried it will look weird in public. However, Ichiro urges her to buy it if she likes it, so she decides to go for it. Following that, they arrive at the book section where she starts yapping about her love for them. She goes through the whole section and buys a bunch of books before heading to a nearby food joint. There, they order custard pudding and Shiori says a prayer to the star people before eating. She reveals it is a common practice to make connections with her people, but since they are so far away, she is not getting any response. Ichiro then shows her a website related to tours and sightseeing that has a story about the children of the island. One day, a girl spotted a falling star crash landing into the nearby forest and went to check up on it. She found the star crying and was able to understand its feeling due to the magical property of the tears. The girl shared the tears with many other children who were all able to understand the star's feelings. With every tear it shed, the star grew smaller and eventually disappeared, but it now lives happily in the hearts of the children who managed to understand its feelings. Shiori reveals it's actually a story of her people, which has been simplified for kids. In reality, a meteor struck the island and brought some microorganisms with it. She further reveals her grandmother was the girl in the story who is considered the first star child. She rarely ever talked to her when she was a kid, but when her mother took the throne 1 year ago, that's when Shiori and her grandma connected. Her granddad recently passed away, so Shiori decided to leave to explore the outside world. She then mentions the annulment, explaining that she is actually fond of him despite his hideous appearance but doesn't want her marriage to be based on an accident. This is why. She wants to start from the beginning and have a genuine connection with Ichiro. The man explains that if they go through with the annulment, she doesn't have to continue pursuing her, because there are better guys out there, but is interrupted by a sneeze. Returning from the restroom, he sees Shiori under siege by a couple of dudes acting like manga experts, hoping it'll earn them a backstage pass to her uncharted territory. Ichiro doesn't want her to be in trouble and grabs her hand so they can skedaddle. However, he feels a strange dark aura that causes him to bleed from the nose. Later, Shiori explains that it is yet another protective measure that stops people from making forceful contact with her. Ichiro explains that he was only trying to stop the boys from swiping her V card, but Shiori did not think men were so desperate for some bone zone. Assuming Ichiro was trying to use force on her, she ended up hurting him and now believes it's best if she just returns to the island. However, Ichiro explains to her that she was only able to learn how to draw because she has a passion for it, so she should stay and continue to pursue it. Shiori is moved by his kindness and thanks him for giving her clarity. As they return home, Machi and the rest learn that they went shopping much to their surprise. When Shiori expresses that she and Ichiro want to spend more time together so they can get to know each other better, the squad is shocked, wondering how this clown-faced idiot bagged a 10-on-10 baddie. The following day, Shiori is inspired by reading a manga depicting the story of a boy who refuses to give up and reunites with his master after a long time. As she wakes up all tired, she explains to Ichiro that she stayed up all night reading 15 volumes of a manga named Lion Fist. She was heartbroken when the master died in Volume 1, but seeing him make a return later warmed her heart. She and Ichiro bond over the beautiful and intense bond between a master and a student, believing that all the distance between them is what makes the protagonist stronger. On that note, Ichiro decides to try being distant from Shiori to figure out how far they can be from each other without him falling sick. Shiori went 2 stations apart from him last time, so this time he asks her to be only 1 station apart to see if it changes anything. Once Shiori reaches the station and enters the train, Ichiro immediately falls sick, believing it is because of the distance. In reality, Shiori just felt really uncomfortable in the crowd, which is what affected Ichiro. Shirio feels sorry because even her mental state can hurt Ichiro. But the man is glad because now he knows they can be 1 station apart without him falling sick. Next up, they decide to test making physical contact, which made him bleed last time. She says there are certain things she doesn't like and shows him the image of a villain, hurting the protagonist to explain what she means. She then pulls out a romance manga and shows him a scene of a guy sneaking up on a girl and covering her eyes. She thinks it's cute and wants to try with him, making him really nervous. Following that, she finds a panel of a guy flirting with a girl by gently pulling her hair and makes him do it to her. Both times, Ichiro's body did not have a weird reaction, unlike the thing in his pants. So she decides to try something a little more intense. She backs up to a wall and asks Ichiro to bring his face closer to her. But when he gets in the pose, Machi and Fumio walk into his room uninvited. Before they can call 911 on his ass, Shiori steps in and explains that he is merely helping her in an experiment, prompting them to leave immediately. Afterward, he asks Shiori to take a break from their shenanigans and write down the things she actually likes. Later, he gets a call from Morikuni and assumes he wants to discuss the plot and the color of the rough sketches he sent this morning. Morikuni praises his art style and his choice of expressions. However, he has something else he wants to discuss. Turns out, people are really vibing with the combat scenes, but now Morikuni wants him to shift his focus to the primary love story. This causes Ichiro to hit writer's block, so he starts doing chores to avoid work. In the meantime, Shiori is in her room, making a list of all the things she wants to try. Later, she finds Ichiro cleaning the windows and tells him that the first thing on her list is to introduce herself to the neighbors, and Ichiro happens to be one of them. She thanks him for everything he's done and asks him to choose something of his liking for the gift pile. After Ichiro picks up a rag to replace it with the old one, she leaves to meet the other neighbors but finds out that no one is home. Ichiro says people don't really greet their neighbors anymore, but it is a common practice in Shiori's homeland, so she really wants to do it. Since people don't like being meddled with, Ichiro suggests she write them a letter and leave the gifts in the mailbox. At night, when Shiori returns home, Shiori introduces herself properly and offers her to choose a gift from the pile. Chihiro chooses the cleaner, so Shiori gives her the box with the letter attached to it. She then reveals nobody has returned home yet, so she is just gonna leave the rest in the mailbox, which means they won't get to pick the gifts of their choice. Chihiro decides to help and reveals Soba really likes food. Anami prefers anything other than food, and Minakami would be happy with just about anything. Maki is very picky about things, so she advises her not to give him a cleaner. Just then, Ichiro walks in, and Shiori gives him a letter, thanking him for helping her with the introductions. Later, Ichiro reads the letter and realizes Shiori's politeness could start a cult, so he pledges to play bodyguard for the public's sake. The next day, as Shiori enters the kitchen, Ichiro asks her to check the whiteboard where all the residents have written a thank you note to her, making her feel really happy. Later, Ichiro is having trouble writing the plot, so Machi and Shiori decide to cheer him up thinking it will help. Just then, Machi hears the doorbell and gets all excited to see an old friend bring her pie. She introduces herself as Momoka and reveals she used to live in this building some time ago. As they gather to eat the pie, Machi reveals Momoka and Ichiro are childhood friends, but now she's married to Morikuni, who is Ichiro's editor. Ichiro introduces Shiori as her new assistant, and Momoka reveals she is also a mangaka. When she learns Momoka is the one who created Lion Fist, she starts fangirling and begs her to sign her copy. They ask what Shiori is working on right now, and she reveals she's only created a basic sketch and has yet to write a plot. She wants to work for Momoka as well but is sad because Momoka only accepts digital work, something she has no experience in. Seeing her in despair, Momoka offers to give her an extra tablet so she can start practicing. She also reveals that Ichiro used to be her assistant, and Machi adds that Momoka is the one who turned her brother into a smelly otaku. Later, as they see Momoka off, she reveals she only came here because Machi wanted him to cheer Ichiro up. They'd also learn that Ichiro's pen name Momotiko-kun is just a mixed-up version of Momoka's actual name, which just shows how much she's helped him in the past. After she leaves, Ichiro finally starts working, wishing he had the confidence and the skill to be like her. Just then, he feels a weird pain in his body and immediately checks up on Shiori to make sure she's feeling okay. When Shiori opens the door, it is obvious from her expression that something is off. She reveals that even though Momoka is an amazing person, she feels really sad knowing that she holds a special place in Ichiro's heart. Ichiro says she's just a friend who is already married, so there is nothing to worry about. Reflecting on her feelings, Shiori admits she is just jealous and realizes that she might have developed feelings for Ichiro. Before Ichiro can open his mouth, she shuts him down, telling him to zip it so she can bask in her love-struck delusions. She then runs back to her room all happy, leaving Ichiro flattered and confused. The next day, Ichiro wakes up in his chair, still shocked about last night's events. Just then, Machi and Fumio entered his room and ask if they can go to the zoo today. Ichiro agrees to take them to see their forefathers, thinking it will help him get over writer's block. The siblings are super excited to go, but their plan is ruined when it starts raining heavily. Ichiro insists they at least grab lunch, but Machi, being the only responsible one in the family, decides to cancel the plan, understanding Ichiro has a lot of work to do. Ichiro returns to his room and starts working, remembering Morikumi's advice to shift his focus to the more romantic elements of the story. However, Ichiro has the emotional intelligence of a BTS fangirl and cannot think of what to write. On top of his current dilemma, he cannot get Shiori out of his head, which is making things worse. Meanwhile, Shiori is in her room, saddened by the fact that she cannot go to the library because of the rain. She is still waiting to get that tablet from Momoka, but until then, she decides to scribble on the paper. Without even realizing it, she ends up creating a sketch of Ichiro and feels embarrassed. Her room is practically a shrine to Ichiro, and even though she thinks it's love, it looks more like a mental illness. She recalls all the moments she's spent with him so far and gets embarrassed, realizing she said some heavy stuff to Ichiro without even realizing it. She's already told him what she feels, which is different from the love stories she has been reading lately. With all that going on in her head, she's basically a walking disaster around Ichiro and doesn't even know how to act. Meanwhile, Ichiro decides to take a break from work and check up on his siblings. As he exits his room, he finds Shiori watching them play games on their phones, and Ichiro explains they're bummed because they had to cancel today's plan. Since Shiori doesn't have anything to do, she decides to play with them to cheer them on. He thanks her for the help and promises to join them once he's finished with his work. Ichiro then retreats to his room and takes a deep breath because he was pretending that yesterday never happened. Shiori herself is extremely nervous and is only acting normally around him so things don't get awkward. She then brushes it off and tends to the kids who are playing with some fortune cards Ichiro made for them. While she joins Machi, Ichiro's brain cells run a marathon as he writes a touching interaction between the two characters of his manga. Once he's finished, he joins the rest in the lounge only to find them all in a gloomy mood. Shiori reveals she was supposed to pick a card from the pile, but ended up tearing it when she pulled it out. Machi pretends to be okay with it, claiming the card was already torn even before she picked it up. Ichiro, realizing these are the same cards he made for them years ago, offers to make a new deck, but Machi says she does not have to. Noticing that she's hiding her true feelings, Shiori asks Machi for her favorite fortune teller and promises to pick up a copy for her. Even when Machi tells her not to, Shiori grabs an umbrella and heads to the library, much to her shock. When Ichiro tells Machi she did it to brighten her day, Machi gets all happy and eagerly waits for her return. However, Ichiro is worried about her, so Aki asks her to go after her and make sure she returns safely. Ichiro meets Shiori halfway back and realizes she forgot to borrow a book for herself, even though that was the main reason she went to the library. She gets worried because she is usually very careful, but Ichiro laughs her worries off and the two walk home together. Later, Machi goes through the book and asks Ichiro to draw him specific cards that she likes. As Ichiro gets to work, both of them watch him with awe, and even Shiori joins in to appreciate his work. She volunteers to draw the borders, and with their collective effort, they are able to draw a brand new deck for Machi. Machi is super excited to try them out, and Shiori adds to her happiness by creating a makeshift stall and dressing her up as a cute little fortune teller. However, Machi gets embarrassed and says she doesn't want to be a real fortune teller because Ichiro is working so hard to send her through college. Ichiro notices her despair and says he will never force her to do something she doesn't want, so if she wants to be a real fortune teller, she should go for it. After encouragement from her brother, Machi feels a little more confident and starts playing with Fumio. Ichiro thanks Shiori for the moral and oral support, and Shiori can't help but admire how supportive he is of everyone. That night, Ichiro leaves a note on the fortune-telling corner, asking the cleaning crew to let it be there for a couple of days. As he lights up the room with the planetarium, Shiori joins him, and they two decide to talk about what happened yesterday. Ichiro says as much as he wants to clap her cheeks, he cannot be in a relationship because he has to take care of his siblings. When he says he still wants the annulment, his body starts showing negative effects. Shiori begs him to stop, but he insists that he has to be honest with her about how he feels. He says dating someone at this point in life feels more like a burden, but despite all of that, he has started to develop feelings for her and wants to go out with her. Shiori is so happy she practically faints, and Ichiro tells her not to worry about the future because they will figure things out along the way. The following day is sunny, so Machi has everyone prepare for their trip to the zoo. Later, Ichiro notices Fumio packing the Zoopedia and tells him to leave it at home because it's heavy. Machi gets him a smaller one so he doesn't have to carry the weight. Just then, Shiori shows up in the lounge and Maki asks her to come with them to the zoo. Ichiro pitches in, telling her that the zoo is pretty close by and she should come along. However, they both get flustered recalling last night's events, which means this is going to be their first official date together. As Shiori packs lunch for herself, Ichiro realizes he needs to tell his siblings about them, but cannot seem to find the words for it. Later, the squad strolls to the zoo, snagging a photo to post on Instagram so they can flex a life that's way cooler than reality. They'd also take a picture of the map, and Machi suggests buying tickets for the pandas first. They'd also decide to visit the petting zoo and see the giraffes, and Shiori just watches from the side, complimenting their strategy. Machi asks if she's ever been to the zoo, and Shiori reveals she never needed to because there were so many animals on the island. The squad then goes around to see different animals, and Shiori finally realizes why every slice of life anime has a zoo-themed episode. Just then, she spots a couple holding hands and thinks to herself that she should try it too. However, when she sees that both of Ichiro's hands are preoccupied, she decides to let it go. When she looks at him with a sad face, Ichiro realizes he hasn't had the chance to talk to her at all, and Shiori feels bad because she thinks she's given him the wrong impression. Later, they arrive at the petting zoo, where Machi and Shiori get to grab and pet baby hamsters. Fumio, however, is nervous about it, which is why the hamsters run away from him. Shiori tells him that animals can sense fear, so they should find the one that connects with him. Eventually, she finds a hamster for Fumio, allowing him to hold it in his hands. After they thoroughly wash their hands, Ichiro notices a boy who appears to be lost and decides to help him. However, the boy runs back to his father, making him look like an idiot. Ichiro assumes he probably scared the boy, but Shiori comments she would love his kindness if she was ever lost. As Machi is laughing at Ichiro for misreading the situation, she suddenly notices that both Ichiro and Shiori are blushing hard and suspects that they're taking it to the pound town. Ichiro suddenly tells her they've only started dating since yesterday, but then he realizes all those times Machi gave him the bombastic side-eye about it. He assumes Machi will scold her, but Machi actually congratulates him for finally getting rid of his cooties. After Machi's approval, Ichiro promises to stay within limits, and Shiori adds that they won't even hold hands to keep things PG. However, Machi tells them to stop being wussies because even grade schoolers hold hands in public. Machi jokingly says she is in the way of their date, but Shiori gets all serious, claiming she is the one interfering in a family event. She understands that Machi and Fumio mean the most to Ichiro, so she asks for their permission to let her into the family. Ichiro also seeks their approval, promising to treasure them all equally. While Machi tells them not to overthink too much about it, Fumio gives them the approval they seek, allowing them to get back to exploring. As they run to see pandas, Machi stops midway and asks Shiori, who in their right mind would be attracted to the walking disaster that is her brother. Before Shiori can answer, Ichiro overhears the conversation and scolds Machi for trying to mess with Shiori. As they continue forward, Shiori starts to wonder what Ichiro likes about her because of Machi's question. Later, after going through several other areas, they'd finally visit the giraffes during the feeding time. While Machi and Fumio are distracted by their purple tunjas and long necks, Ichiro thanks Shiori for what she did earlier because it made him happy. Shiori shares the sentiment, explaining that she is extra happy because he promised to include her in his dysfunctional family. She then suggests they hold hands while watching giraffes, and Ichiro complies with her request. While doing so, Shiori feels her loins burning, so much so that her eyes tear up. When she explains how happy she truly is, Machi and Fumio latch onto her, because they are delighted to witness her in this state. In the meantime, Shiori's parents, Ken and Miyako, discuss how they have received no word from their daughter recently. They ask Kameki and Madako, but they reveal they have also not heard anything from Shiori. Kameki is worried because he has been trying to listen with no response, but Madako claims it's because of the distance. Miyako, on the other hand, is frustrated thinking Shiori is wasting her time wandering around aimlessly and asks the two to inform her as soon as they get a word from her. At night, the squad finally returns home, and the siblings immediately hit the bed. Ichiro returns to his room on a blank page, but decides to wash the lunchboxes to avoid working. Shiori hops in the shower, but no amount of scrubbing can rinse off the anxiety of wondering why Ichiro even likes her. It starts to bother her so much that she knocks on his door to ask, but when Ichiro does not respond, she decides to take a peep. Just then, Chihiro shows up in the halls and they two get to talking, which ends with Shiori telling her that she and Ichiro are now dating. Chihiro wishes her the best of luck and tells her that Ichiro is in the dining hall. As Shiori gets there, she sees that Ichiro has fallen asleep on the table and notices that he has a cute neck. However, she stops herself from touching him because she thinks it's inappropriate to touch someone in their sleep. She then wonders if she can be an exception since they are dating and ultimately decides to wake him up by calling his name. She suggests he sleeps in the bed since that is more comfortable and asks his permission to touch the back of his neck. Ichiro tells her that she does not need to ask anymore, allowing her to satisfy her needs. Later, she wakes up and realizes she forgot to ask him what he likes about her. The next day, Ichiro takes his work to Morikuni, who approves his ship to more emotions in the manga. When he calls it Ichiro's best work yet, the man is finally able to take a sigh of relief because he has been working his ass off for this. When Morikuni jokes about Ichiro becoming soft because of his girlfriend, Ichiro forces out a laugh, praying his paycheck doesn't hinge on his boss's sense of humor. Ichiro then returns home all happy, crediting Shiori for giving him some emotional intelligence. He wishes to see that same look on her face again, but doesn't want to get too ahead of himself. Just then, Shiori shows up, and he hesitantly asks her to help him with the next batch of work. Shiori agrees to help, but Ichiro notices that something is off about her. When asked, she explains she applied as an assistant in 2 firms, but one of them has rejected her proposal due to design-related discrepancies. Although she is disheartened, Ichiro tells her not to worry as it takes some time to find a suitable job. He asks her about the second proposal, and Shiori reveals she has not heard back from them yet. However, she believes she won't get the job there because of the technical aspect and a mismatch of vibe. She explains everything that went down, starting with her meeting an artist named Sano, who immediately thought she was an upper-class lady because of her manners. He showed her a digital analog hybrid and asked her to draw the backgrounds by hand. Shiori was confident because she had already read a lot of Sano's work and wanted to give her all since the last gig did not go so well. As she presented her work, Sano was quite impressed, and she told him she tried to replicate his other work because she was a big fan. Sano was shocked because there were heaps of other artists who did similar work, but Shiori was uninformed about them because she only started this a year ago. Sano assumed her family must have been very strict because she was an upper-class lady, but Shiori corrected him that she was a princess. Seeing the look on his face, she realized she should keep her princess status a secret and lie that she merely pretended to be an influencer on Instagram. Sano brushed it off and got back to work, but it was quite evident that Shiori freaked him out a little. Because of that reason, Shiori believes Sano will reject her as well and she'll end up jobless. Ichiro tries to lift her spirits by revealing that she will get a tablet from Momoka soon, which will help her expand her skills. Ichiro then asks her about the list she wrote the other day, offering his help in whatever way he can. He blurts out that he wants to cheer her up, and Machi shows up suggesting only some raw meat can cheer a lady up. Since they have some free time on their hands, they decide to go out and have a barbecue. Once there, Shiori is delighted and explains she only participated in small barbecues back on the island, so this is very exciting for her. After stuffing their faces with a shit ton of meat, they walk back home, and Shiori is fully satisfied with the experience. She recalls her experiences on the island where she was not allowed to participate and even had to dine alone because children were scared of getting yelled at. Back then, she was forced to give up the life that she wanted, but now that she's free, she can enjoy the basic delights of life. Ichiro praises her for never giving up on her dream, stating that he really admires those who take a stand for themselves. He says he often thought of giving up, but when he saw the smile on his siblings' faces, it gave him the push that he needed to keep working hard. When Shiori says she'll work harder too, Ichiro tells her that she is already doing fine and doesn't need to change anything. However, Ichiro believes he could have phrased his feelings better, which makes him a little sad. Heading home, Machi and Fumio enjoyed popsicles when Shiori shows up looking for Ichiro. Machi reveals he's been holed up in his room ever since they returned, so Shiori decides not to bother him and have some coffee instead. However, she's so stressed about Ichiro's hermit act that she turns the coffee counter into a caffeine crime scene. Meanwhile, Ichiro is depressed because he wants to simp even harder for Shiori but fails miserably. He reflects on his inability to convey his feelings while speaking, so instead, he decides to write a letter to Shiori. He recalls how he has been able to rely on Shiori for so much more than work, and wants to help get over the insecurity that she's not dependable. Thus, he spends the entire night writing her an elaborate letter expressing how he feels about her. The next day, he knocks on Shiori's door to let her know he's leaving her a letter in the mailbox, but Shiori comes out all sad, apologizing for last night. When she realizes Ichiro has no idea what she's yapping about, she invites him in and shows him a new art style she's been practicing. This makes Ichiro feel insecure about his letter, where he has only drawn basic doodles of her. However, Shiori grabs the letter from his hand, which turns out to be a whole storybook decorated with several illustrations of them. She is so moved by Ichiro's gesture that her eyes fill up with tears. 80 pages of compliments later, she's a sobbing mess like she just watched The Pianist for the first time. When she notices that Ichiro is hesitant to wipe her tears, she grabs his hand and gently places it on her cheek, promising to treasure this gift forever. Later, Ichiro gets a call from Sano, who mentions that Shiori came over the other day for an interview. Sano says he asked her about him, and Shiori started blushing as soon as she heard Ichiro's name. Sano wants to play wingman and hook them up, but Ichiro tells him he's always 2 steps ahead. Sano wasn't sure if Shiori was an employee or a TikTok cosplayer, but since she's a homegirl now, he decided to hire her, much to Ichiro's delight. The next day, Ichiro is preparing an elaborate meal in the kitchen, and Shiori's practically drowning in admiration for his large manhood. As Shiori enters the kitchen, Ichiro reveals he's going out with the kids today and offers her some apples. Shiori's brain is high on love, so she starts acting like a goof around him, and Ichiro notices she's avoiding eye contact ever since he gave her that letter. He assumes Shiori is a little embarrassed after they shared that intimate moment and decides to give her the space that she needs. Ichiro meets up with Chihiro in the hall before going to his siblings' room to pick them up. However, he finds the room empty and returns to the kitchen to find them holding onto Shiori's hands. He explains that they are going to visit their dad's grave, so it's best to let Shiori stay back, but Fumio insists she tags along. Later, they walk towards the graveyard and Ichiro is still wondering if it was a good idea to bring Shiori along. Once at the grave, they perform the ritual and say their prayers, and Ichiro tells his father about the latest developments in the family. Following that, they head to the nearby picnic spot where they all eat rice balls that Ichiro prepared in the morning. As they enjoy the food, Machi randomly blurts out that Ichiro and Shiori are dating, and Shiori comments that they make a cute couple. Both of them get extremely happy to receive that compliment, and Chihiro has to pretend that he wasn't planning on getting on his knees for Ichiro before Shiori came into his life. Following that, they get to talking about how lively and hardworking their father was, and Machi wishes he had taken care of his health too. Noticing their despair, Ichiro plays the role of Bug Daddy and hugs both his siblings, assuring them that everything will be okay. Shiori reveals that they pray together while stargazing to remember the dead back on her island. She recalls the day when her family and people got together to remember Shiori's grandmother, the very person who opened her eyes to the outside world. She believes sitting under the blue sky and having a picnic is also a good way to remember the dead, although it is different from her people's traditions. When they ask what she means by her people, Shiori realizes she needs to be careful because they don't know about her origins. As they pack up, Ichiro realizes he forgot to offer the manju buns and tells the rest to go ahead while he checks up on her. After asking Chihiro to look after his siblings, he runs back to the grave. Shiori follows right after him, explaining that he looked a little sad, so she decided to come with him. Returning to the grave, Ichiro offers the bun and mentions how everything happened so quickly back then. His father never complained about anything, so they did not know until it was too late. Shiori notices that Ichiro did not mention anything about himself to his father, so she speaks on his behalf and lets him know that his son is an amazing person with a massive schlong. Noticing how worried he looks, Shiori suggests he lets it all out, but the man says it will take him some time to be comfortable with it. Following that, Ichiro introduces her dad to Shiori, wishing that their relationship lasts a long time. At night, Shiori is gushing over being introduced and gets flustered imagining a scenario where she and Ichiro get married and live happily after. Feeling her temperature rising, she heads to the kitchen where she sees Ichiro practicing how to be a good housewife. He notices that her face is all red and soon learns that she has a mild fever. After putting her in bed, Ichiro returns to the kitchen, wondering if regular medicine will work on her, since she's different from the rest. He recalls how Shiori lied next to him to make him feel better when he was sick, so he wants to do something for her to repay her kindness. Later, Shiori wakes up to Ichiro telling Machi and Fumio to let her rest. He then enters her room and leaves something for her to eat on the side table. Before he can leave her alone, Shiori grabs his arm and asks him to stay with her a little longer. As Ichiro gets seated beside her, she reveals that her room back on the island is quite spacious, but her people come running to her whenever she calls for them. However, when she saw this room for the first time, she realized small rooms are rather lovely and cozy compared to big ones. When Ichiro asks her not to waste her energy by talking, she says she must keep talking so he doesn't leave her alone. Ichiro feels flattered and holds her hand, promising to stay by her side for as long as she wants. The next day, Shiori wakes up all better and realizes Ichiro is still sitting beside her like he promised. Even though they were apart, Shiori gets flustered because technically they slept together for the first time. Just then, Ichiro wakes up and apologizes for dozing off like this. As he gets up to leave the room, Shiori runs in and hugs him from the back. Ichiro impulsively turns around and gives her a proper hug, making her think the fever is a blessing in disguise. Soon after, Machi and Fumio enter the room, glad to see that Shiori is in good health. Ichiro then walks them to the kitchen to make them breakfast, and Machi notices that his face is a traffic light on red. A few days later, the world is preparing to celebrate Christmas, but Ichiro and Shiori are working their ass off to meet the deadline. Eventually, they manage to finish the task at hand on time, and Shiori is happy to experience the hellish end of the year schedule. As they pack up, Ichiro realizes Christmas is almost here and imagines himself taking Shiori to a fancy dinner. He asks Shiori if she has any plans with her family for Christmas, but Shiori reveals she will be staying here. Just then, the siblings enter the room and Ichiro tells them Shiori will be staying over for Christmas. When Shiori says people on her island don't celebrate it, Machi covers Fumio's ears because the dumb kid thinks Santa is real. Machi, on the other hand, thinks Santa can't make it to Japan because he lives overseas, but it doesn't bother her much since she already got a present from Santa. When Shiori asks what Santa gave her, she says Fumio, meaning her mom, opened more than just presents that night.
You don't find that suspicious?
Machi invites Shiori to the Christmas party, and Ichiro knows it's either gonna get sloppy or he's getting some toppy. That evening, Momoka visits the dysfunctional family bearing refreshments, and Sano shows up right after her. As the family greets them, Shiori notices that Fumio is quite close to Sano, because he used to work as Ichiro's assistant. Ichiro knows Sano has a debut volume coming out, and when Sano promises to give him a free copy, he learns Ichiro already pre-ordered it to show his support. Later, as they gather to have lunch, Shiori compliments Ichiro's cooking skills, prompting Machi to call them lovebirds. This shocks Momoka because she had no idea they were dating, and Shiori explains she was the first one to confess. She asks Momoka to share childhood stories of Ichiro, and she recalls the time she fell and injured her knee. Momoka did not take it very seriously, so Ichiro got mad at her, worrying she would get infected. Shiori is overjoyed to see how caring he is and wants to hear more stories about him. She asks Chihiro to share some since they have known each other since they were kids. Chihiro shares the story of when she first moved here for high school and was pretty sad because she had to move away from her parents. However, Ichiro took care of her all that time, which made her quite happy. Machi adds that Ichiro has the habit of letting her go first, whether it's food or baths, and Shiori's panties are draining and how kind he really is. Momoka asks Shiori to tell more about herself, and she reveals she's from an island called Yobajima. When she mentions how pretty the stars look from there, Momoka asks her to share some of her favorite memories from her time there. However, all of Shiori's memories are that of a princess, so Momoka apologizes for asking a personal question. She then gives Shiori a gift, which is actually the tablet she promised to give her weeks ago. Later, they see both Sano and Momoka off, and Machi decides to stay up a little longer so she can tell Shiori more stories about Ichiro. Chihiro realizes this is her chance to get to know her better, so she invites both of them for a sleepover, which excites Shiori. Later, they show up in her room wearing pajamas, and Shiori notices Chihiro has a lot of books. Chihiro is more than happy to let her borrow them and even recommends one of her favorites. Just then, Maki asks her what she keeps in the cases, and she sternly tells her to stay away from them, making them wonder if she's hiding all her vibration wands in there. Later, they all sit together as friends to have a real talk, and Shiori finally decides to tell them her secret. At the same time, Ichiro is bringing them some snacks but waits by the door because he doesn't want to interrupt them. She vaguely tells them that she is a princess and that keeping it from them has been a burden. But Machi tells her they are still friends even if she does not tell them certain things. Machi and Chihiro both pitch in that they have some secrets of their own and it is totally normal, allowing them to get even close to each other. Ichiro decides not to bother them and leaves, worrying about how he can make it better for her. The next day, Ichiro gets his siblings some presents, and they believe it was Santa who dropped them. When Shiori enters the kitchen, Ichiro asks if she asks her to free her schedule for the night, because they are going on a Christmas date. Meanwhile, Ken asks Miyako if she would like to go out with him tonight, but she turns him down like a mean bitch. Ken hopes that their daughter is doing well, but Miyako is frustrated because she hasn't contacted them for a while. That night, Ichiro takes Shiori out, who is thrilled to see all the Christmas decorations in the city. Ichiro comments on how they look prettier than usual this time, and Shiori asks if it's because he's looking at them with her. Ichiro gets flustered and says yes, but Shiori is a little sad because even though they love each other's company, their pact causes him physical pain sometimes. However, Ichiro is so far gone at this point that he doesn't care about it anymore. He says he no longer wants to date her as a test run and asks her if she would like to marry her in the future. Shiori is so moved by his proposal that she seals the deal with a kiss and promises to love him forever. Later, the two return home with some cake and Machi notices that they are going through 50 Shades of Red. After retreating to her room, Shiori starts gushing over her first kiss and how a mere 2-second contact feels like an eternity. However, all her excitement vanishes when she receives a text from her mother. The next day, Ichiro meets Shiori in the hallway and notices that Shiori is in a bad mood. She explains that she received a text from her mother who is looking forward to her return. She doesn't know when she will be able to leave the island, so she told her mother it'll be a while before she returns. Shiori apologizes for not knowing how to annul the marriage but reveals he's asked someone trustworthy to look into it. Ichiro tells her not to worry so much and asks her for help to prepare for the new year to cheer her up. The duo heads to the grocery store to buy stuff, and after filling their tummies with snacks and oranges, the four of them pay a visit to the shrine. After praying to the gods for a little luck, they hit the lottery game, but the only thing they win is disappointment. Shiori is the only one left with a ticket, and when she tries it out, she wins the golden prize, which is a family ticket for an overnight hot spring. The shopkeeper tells them the ticket will expire at the end of the month, so Shiori wastes no time and takes them all for a trip. Once there, they get a whole place to themselves with a great view of Mount Fuji. As they settle in to play ping pong, Shiori gets another call from her mother, but chooses to ignore it. Soon after, Shiori and Machi get into the women's hot spring while Ichiro and Fumio enjoy their time in the male one. Once they return, Ichiro asks Shiori if Machi saw her stinger, but she says there is nothing to worry about because she had it tucked away the whole time. After feasting on a table full of Japanese cuisine, Machi and Fumio hit the bed while Ichiro heads to the footbath. Just then, Shiori joins him and says she wants to try something new with him. Ichiro gets flustered thinking they're gonna get freaky, but Shiori just wanted to try out a drawing app on her new tablet. After playing around with different features of the drawing app, they had to talk about how they've never had such a new year before. Shiori says she is having a lot of fun, but feels guilty about it because she is a long way away from home. She reveals her mother had no intention of letting her go, but her grandmother's dying wish was to let her explore the world, which is why she couldn't oppose it. She apologizes for talking about sad stuff on a trip, but Ichiro assures her that she doesn't have to pretend to be happy for his sake. He wants her to really enjoy this trip and wishes they had a way to make her feel better without having her go back to the island. Shiori suddenly leans on him, stating that she already feels much better because she has someone who truly understands her. The next day, the squad is preparing to leave when she gets another call from her mother. She sums up the courage to pick up the call and asks Shiori to listen in on it. Her mother scolds her for not keeping in touch and tells her that she has no life outside of the island, much to Shiori's frustration. She asserts she has people who care about her here too and ends up revealing that she is banging an orphan. Ichiro suddenly grabs the phone and introduces himself frantically, but Miyako is surprised and ends the call immediately. Ichiro starts panicking thinking he messed up and explains that he only wanted to show that she's loved here too. Shiori, on the other hand, starts laughing because she finds it cute how he basically signed his own death sentence. As they return to the city, Ichiro gets worried thinking he might have made things worse for Shiori. Meanwhile, Miyako has gathered all the elders and tells them that Ichiro hung up on her after saying he's smashing her daughter. Because of her manipulation, the elders think Ichiro has somehow kidnapped or deceived the princess, so they went to go on a search and rescue mission. Meanwhile, Ichiro hears Shiori's phone ringing, but she refuses to pick up because she doesn't want to talk to her mother. However, Ichiro is worried he has made things worse for them by blurting things out mindlessly. Shiori argues that she was really happy when he said all of those things, so there is no need for him to regret his words. She goes on a whole yapping session about how highly thinks of him, and when she notices that he's lost in his own pity party, she explains how it breaks her heart to see him look down on himself. Because of these intense emotions, Ichiro collapses on the floor and finds himself floating in a sea of stars, much like when he touched her stinger for the first time. As he regains his strength, Shiori lends him a shoulder to lean on and complains about how arguing with him is like playing Russian roulette with his immune system. As she helps him get seated on a sofa and gives him some water, Ichiro comments that she looks cute when she's upset. Just then, Machi and Fumio run in all worried, but he tells them to relax because he only got a little dizzy. Machi then gives him 2 matching keychains as a souvenir to thank them for the trip and leaves with Fumio. After they leave, Shiori says she no longer wants to trouble him with the pact, so they decide to visit her island together so they can annul their marriage and continue dating peacefully. At night, the 4 of them walk home and are shocked to find Shiori's family waiting at the door, who have come take her home. When Ichiro introduces himself, Ken is a bit taken aback because he imagined him to be a gangster mafia lord, but instead got a guy who looks like he orders milk at bars. Since Ichiro appears harmless, they decide to leave for the night and reschedule their meeting for tomorrow morning. After they leave, Shiori and Ichiro start to panic and retreat to their room to discuss the issue. Shiori says she will not go back at any cost and her parents can't force her, since a dying wish from her grandmother holds extreme value. However, she is worried her parents might do something to Ichiro's family. But Ichiro believes they are not the type to harm innocents. Besides, they are the only people who know how to annul their engagement, so it's best if they keep things family-friendly. She explains how if they talk about the annulment, her mother would think they are breaking up, so they will have to keep their relationship a secret because her mother doesn't listen to reason. In the end, they decide to ask her parents about annulment and have them leave peacefully. The next day, they leave the kids in Chihiro's care and leave to meet Shiori's parents. Once there, Ichiro tries to get them all on the same page, but Shiori's mother straight up says she will not allow this relationship under any circumstance. This sparks an argument between Shiori and Miyako, so Ken suggests they behave and talk like adults. Later, as they all get seated, Shiro gives them a diary in which she writes everything she likes about Ichiro. However, Miyako says none of this matters because Ichiro will bolt like a cartoon coward the second her secret's out. When Shiori argues that he already knows and still accepts her, Miyako starts scolding her for revealing her secret to a stranger. When Shiori explains that he accidentally got stung by her stinger, Miyako goes overboard, blaming them for swiping V-cards out of wedlock. She believes Ichiro manipulated her daughter to get some oral support from her, but Shiori realizes her mother has no faith in her and bolts out of there. Miyako recalls the day when Shiori happily told her how she was the faster runner in her grade and had got first place on field day. She asks if she can play tag with the other kids, and Miyako explains she will never be tagged because she is a princess. She explained how even though she is young, she is the future of the star people, so she cannot be like normal kids. Coming to the present, Ichiro runs after Shiori and finds her wallowing in her misery. The two get to talking and Ichiro explains his mom's not exactly a ray of sunshine, so he knows what it is like. He sometimes wishes he had a better relationship with his mother, and Shiori shares the same feeling. Just then, Ken comes in running and asks them to come back so they can have a proper conversation. As they rejoin Miyako, she finally stops being a bitch and apologizes to Shiori for thinking so lowly of her. She then asks what really happened, and Ichiro goes into detail about how he came across her stinger. Miyako still isn't willing to accept this relationship, so she asks them to get an annulment. When Shiori agrees to get one, she believes annulment and breakup are synonymous and is relieved about it. When Shiori asserts that she will stay here because she has some things to do, her mother goes on a rant about how she'll become useless if she keeps wasting her time here. She reveals how Shiori is still living off the allowance money they sent her, so this whole idea of independence isn't really working out for her. Ichiro pitches in and asks if is it really so bad that she gets to have fun doing what she likes, even if it doesn't pay well. He tells them about all the good things Shiori has done for him and his siblings, explaining that sometimes it is okay to chase passion rather than money. He then pulls out all the things Shiori has worked on with him to show her parents that she in fact is accomplishing a lot ever since she came here. He understands that they are worried for her because she's their daughter, but he politely asks them to give her some time to do what she wants. Ken is so moved by Ichiro's words that he decides to give her 1 year during which he will slowly decrease allowance and let Shiori become financially independent. After settling the affair, the two of them prepare to return to the island, and Ken promises to send them the documents on how to annul their engagement. As they leave, Shiori and Ichiro take a sigh of relief, and Shiori thanks him for having her back today. Meanwhile, Machi and Fumio are getting really worried about Ichiro and wish Shiori would just join their family. This means they will have both a big brother and a big sister to take care of them. So Machi creates a fake shooting star and wishes for it. Soon after, the duo returns home exhausted, and the siblings are relieved things went well with Shiori's parents. A few days later, Mikado and Kameki show up at their door to perform the ceremony which will annul their pact. Just then, Kameki starts feeling seasick, and Shiori uses this distraction to tell Ichiro that Mikado is on her side. Ichiro quickly realizes the person who's been helping Shiori all this time is also Mikado. Later, Mikado pulls out forceps made from the Yobi stone on the island, which they will use to remove the stinger from Ichiro. There are some other things they will need to do, but Mikado tells them to leave all preparations to her and just follow her lead. Amid their conversation, Kameki starts feeling even sicker, so Shiori takes him to her room where he can rest. Afterward, Mikado takes measurements of Ichiro, explaining that they will need to wear traditional uniforms for the ceremony. She explains how she used to work under Shiori's grandmother, which is why she wants to help her now. She further explains that the ceremony can be performed anywhere and anytime, but a ritual is built around it to preserve the use of Yobi stone. Ichiro comments that he's glad to finally annul the pact, but Mikado already knows how much he loves her. However, she explains that the feelings they have for each other might just be due to the pact, so removing it might also remove the love between them. However, since this ceremony has never been performed, she isn't so sure about her theory. Meanwhile, Shiori asks Kameki why he didn't stay in the island, and the guy reveals it's because he was quite literally dying to see her. Shiori feels flattered and is about to leave so he can rest, but Kameki urges her to stay, explaining that he got a piece of Yobi stone from Miyako, which allows him to share his thoughts with the star people outside of the island. Using the stone, he asks Shiori to come back home, stating that everyone there is eagerly waiting for her. When Shiori says she has no intention of going back, Kameki realizes it is because of Ichiro and admits that it is only natural for others to fall in love with her given how lovely she truly is. However, he is worried Ichiro will fall out of love once the pact is annulled, injecting Shiori with a dose of doubt and worry. Later, Kameki and Mikado leave, promising to return in tomorrow afternoon after all the preparations are complete. Afterward, Ichiro and Shiori pretend to be okay around each other despite the fear of losing their feelings, and Machi is quick to realize that something is off about these two. Machi worries Shiori is about to leave them but feels much better when she learns she isn't going anywhere. After Ichiro bribes them with hot chocolate and puts them to bed, he receives a call from Momoka who wishes him a happy new year. She is quick to notice that something is off about Ichiro, so she suggests sending Machi and Fumio over to her sometimes so he and Shiori can have some alone time. Ichiro tells her he has to be somewhere important with Shiori tomorrow, so it would be great if the kids could come over to her place. She then asks Ichiro to explain what's going on, and the guy tells her how much he loves Shiori, which is why he's scared to lose her. Momoka cheers him on with her usual goofy persona, giving him a much-needed break from all that brainstorming. After the call ends, he recalls all the intimate moments between the two of them and wishes they never fall apart. Meanwhile, Shiori has trouble sleeping and recalls the time when Kameki told her he was a candidate to marry her. The guy was super excited to grow up and marry her, but when she asked what he liked in her, he said it was the fact that she was a princess. Shiori realized how restricted she was because of her status and wondered how many other things she could have been if she wasn't the princess. One day, she stumbled into her grandmother's library, where she started reading romance mangas, giving her a different perspective on choosing a life partner. Shiori also recalls the time when Ichiro asked her to marry him in the future, but she can't help but wonder what she will do if his feelings were to change tomorrow. The next day, Miyako seems distressed about the ceremony but Ken assures her that everything will work out for the best. Meanwhile, Shiori is all dressed up for the ceremony and Kameki is flattered to see how bangable she looks in that outfit. He offers to be her partner in the future and vows to work super hard to be deserving of her, but Shiori hits him with a silent treatment. On the other hand, Ichiro is accompanied by Mikado to a fancy resort where he learns Miyako and Ken will not be joining them today. Just then, they meet up with Shiori and Ichiro is quick to notice that she looks tired. mainly because she stayed up all night crying. As they get seated, Kameki starts recording the ceremony for Shiori's parents, and Mikado brings out a sake sacred to the island that will manifest the stinger inside Ichiro. After he chugs it down, a stinger appears on his forehead, and Shiori is instructed to pull it out using the forceps. During the procedure, Ichiro recalls all the good times he spent with Shiori and wishes he had talked to her more about this. Only now did he realize how much she truly meant to her, and that he was simply embarrassed to admit his true feelings. He thought they would have all the time to discuss those things slowly, but now he is scared that his feelings will vanish once the stinger is removed. Just as he's about to tell her how much he loves her, Shiori pulls out the stinger, leaving him in shock. Mikado and Kameki declare it a success and are about to leave, but when Shiori hesitantly asks him if he still loves her, Ichiro comes out of shock and embraces her, stating that he loves her more than ever. As they break down to tears, Kameki wants to interfere, but Mikado carries him away by saying their job is complete. Afterward, Ichiro and Shiori stay at the resort until nightfall, happy to have preserved their bond despite the annulment. A few days later, Machi and Fumio hug Shiori before leaving for school, and Ichiro explains they're really happy she decided to stay with them. The man says he has to finish up a draft today and can go on a date tomorrow, making Shiori jump with joy. Later, Shiori realizes all her dresses are black, and since this is their first date since the annulment, she decides to buy new clothes for the occasion. As she heads to the mall, she runs into Chihiro and states her trouble in picking out a fit for a date. Chihiro offers her help in the matter, and even though Shiori usually wears what she likes, she now feels the urge to appeal to Ichiro with her looks. However, Chihiro mentions that Ichiro is the type of guy who'd throw around compliments hoping to get laid. She recalls the time when she was crying over having an orange kimono when she wanted a blue one, and Ichiro told her she looked like a flower among all the green, which made her happy. Seeing her blush, Shiori asks her if she has feelings for Ichiro, and Chihiro reveals she's been in love with him for years. She says it started off platonic, but then she started wishing for more. However, she has accepted that Ichiro will never love her back, so it doesn't hurt as much as it did before. She further adds that she was relieved when Ichiro started going out with Shiori and promises that she is really happy for the two of them. Later, the two of them return home, and Shiori excitedly tells him she went out shopping for their date tomorrow. This makes him realize he's dressed as a hermit and needs to buy something that makes him look presentable. He immediately runs to Sano's place to seek his help in turning him from a hideous loser to a slightly less hideous loser. Sano is shocked to see Ichiro in this state and realizes that the thirst for getting some really changes a man. The next day, Ichiro arrives at their meeting spot looking like a Vogue reject, and Shiori demonstrates that love truly is blind. After drooling over each other, they start walking around all happy and nervous at the same time. Later, they watch people do ice skating and decide to give it a go, only to realize that they are less athletic than an obese hamster. Eventually, Shiori figures out how to keep her footing and offers Ichiro a hand to walk him out. However, Ichiro wants to get a hold of it himself, so he asks her to wait for him. Later, Shiori is watching him from the outside and recalls Chihiro confessing her love for him. Much like her, Shiori did not understand her true feelings in the beginning, but now realizes how much she loves Ichiro. As he makes his way to her, she sheds a tear explaining how scared she was to lose him during the annulment. Ichiro shares the sentiment, regretting how he never truly spoke his heart out back then. He believes that if he had fallen out of love after the annulment, his feelings would have been so genuine that he would have fallen for her all over again. He further reveals how he was hesitant to hold her hand because he didn't want her to think he was getting ahead of himself. But now he realizes that what they have is genuine. This is why he wants to open up to her more and offers to hold her hand. The two then skate hand in hand and return all back, and Machi is really happy to see them bro on each other. Later, Ichiro frets over how much they spent last month on trips and decides to cut back on the expenses for this month. Just then, Machi and Fumio enter the room to let him know that they're going to be playing in the park with their friends. Later, as the kids are playing, it gets all cloudy, and one of their friends offers them to come to her place. She also asks Machi to come to the amusement park with them later, but Machi turns her down. As she walks back home with Fumio, Shiori happens to pass by and notices the sad expression on her face. As they return home, Shiori joins in and Machi, realizing she heard everything, asks her not to tell Ichiro about it. Later, Shiori is in her room and feels unsettled because she has never seen Machi be so sad before. She eventually can't take it and walks up to Machi, promising to keep it a secret from Ichiro, Ichi tells her what's been bothering her. Machi explains that the reason she doesn't go with her friends is that she enjoys playing with Fumio. But Fumio knows she is holding back because she doesn't want to leave him alone. When he tells her to go play with her friends, Machi starts crying out loud and Ichiro comes running to check up on her. He realizes that even though Machi does enjoy Fumio's company, she turns her friends down because she thinks Ichiro already does so much for them. She saw him fretting over the bills earlier and thought she would cut back on her expenses to help him. However, Ichiro feels hopeless, explaining he works so hard so his family doesn't have to worry about the expenses. But since they do, he feels like he's let them down. Ichiro then comforts Machi, urging her to share her troubles with him. In the end, Machi makes up with Fumio and apologizes for causing this mess. Shiori asks what she likes to do with her friends, and she reveals that she really enjoys playing with fireworks. Ichiro promises to take them to the fireworks festival next year, but Shiori goes one step ahead and decides to have their own private festival. That night, while Chihiro and Ichiro prepare noodles, they invite Momoka and Sano and decide to have an outdoor party. As they get to eating, Onami returns from work and Shiori invites her to join them. When Ichiro asks when they became friends, Shiori reveals she ran into her in the middle of the night, and Hanami even taught her to do her nails. After all is said and done, the group lights up the fireworks and Machi thanks Ichiro for everything he has done for them. Later, Ichiro thanks Shiori for setting this up, because his own pea-brain would have never thought of it in a million years. However, Shiori believes it was a team effort and everyone deserves equal credit for it. Ichiro again thanks Shiori for making him realize he is surrounded by the people who love him, and advises her to roam free since she is not bound by the star people anymore. Shirio says he wants to explore a lot of new things in the world and will work super hard to become financially independent for that. She also reveals she will be the one who proposes to Ichiro, which makes the guy blush. As they hold hands, Machi and Fumio join them, and everyone congratulates them for building a successful relationship. That's it for this video. Drop a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for similar content. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.